Hello everybody, and I hope you're having a fantastic day, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the two collab spawns that just recently came out. I think it was yesterday, but yeah. Okay, so let's get to them. I'm actually going to do it reverse this time. I'm actually going to be talking about the spawn. There's not much. I could talk about the monsters, right? There's no actual legitimate way to actually earn the monsters yet, so I'm going to talk about the spawns first. Going to be quick, then I'll talk about the monsters. That's going to be more on the more what's going to take time in the video. So let's actually get to this. Okay, so the spawn right here, the whole step up spawn is legitimately similar to the actual one time only they got right here for 80 gems. Difference is with this one, it's going to cost a bit more. I think this one's 65 gems if I'm correct. Yeah, it's 65 gems. This one's actually going to be 80 gems, so that's like I think 15 more. This one's also going to offer an ether. And then it's going to offer 2 XP quest keys, and whatever you're getting, it's going to be ultra at max level. So that's also going to be another thing they're going to have. So that's pretty big handy for 15 more gems compared to this one. I personally think that's a good deal. So I personally would do, if you plan on doing the step up spawn, I personally would think about doing this first, and then I would do the actual step up spawn, considering that you're actually, well, let me rephrase myself there, because you're actually guaranteed one select gear piece. So it's really what you want, cheaper price, but like I personally think the ether would be more worth it personally for me. Maybe not for you, you might get lucky with the gear piece, but anyways, pretty dang similar. As I said, the only reason I would consider going for either of these two though is for the prestige. If you already don't have like as much prestige as you could obtain, and you're going hardcore for this collab right now, which I barely even touched, to be fairly honest, at all, which I probably should, but I don't really care all too much. That's the only reason I would consider even going for the two, is for the heck of, or for the sake of just getting more prestige. Of course there's a chance to get a monster, but you're probably going to have to use a lot of gems, not guaranteed whatsoever. And then on top of it, it's going to be a random stats. I think they are going to have more spawns. You can actually wait. It's going to be 8 full days. So I think it's going to be as long as the second half is going to be in the first place. So if you want to wait to see what other spawns they have out, so that way you don't have to wail for these, hoping to get the monsters, you absolutely can, because this isn't, I wouldn't find this much of a necessary process. I think they're going to have better methods or spawns to actually wail for the monsters, because this is kind of like a dead end spawn, and there's almost, well, there's kind of like a trace or a blueprint, but that's pretty much it to actually obtain the monsters. There's no actually method or guarantee that you're actually going to be obtaining the monsters whatsoever, and that's just, it just truly sucks. But other than that, let's actually move on to the last two parts I want to talk about. The bottom three right here, not worth mentioning whatsoever. Please don't do them. You're legitimately throwing 30 gems down the drain, and when I say literally, I mean literally throwing 30 gems down the drain. Please don't touch those. Okay, so we got the collab SSR guaranteed weapon and the collab armor guaranteed. With the weapon, it's going to be a random stats, not random stats, but it's going to be a random class, so you could absolutely get something that might not be of your class. But the cool thing about these two is just for 30 gems, you're able to obtain the highest cost gear in the game. 37 cost armors, highest cost. 36 cost weapons are the highest cost in the game. The higher the cost, the more stats they're going to get. Now when it comes to the armors, I pretty much would consider them only for gear score and cosmetics. The ability they have, not really all too worth it. Of course, they're going to give prestige right now for the event that's out, but that's as far as it goes. Their magic damage, well, they got damage down now, so that's very interesting. Still, I personally find damage down, let alone damage down double XL, way more worth it than just magic damage down XL personally. So this skill is kind of like, it's not completely useless, but if you're looking to really boost performance to the maximum you can, I'd say it's pretty dang useless. And then like the weapons have like physical, magical testament. The only one that doesn't is the bow, which is fatal testament XL. I personally find this the only skill worth it out of them all to consider as a long-term skill. Again, they will be giving a lot of gear score. They're the highest cost, and they are part of the collab. So if you're interested in the collection, you absolutely can get them. But if you watch my previous video on the Fatal Testament XL versus double XL, you would know that the double XL doesn't have much of a proc difference. It may have like a 3% increase, and that's about it, maybe 5 maximum. Nothing so serious or threatening to the point where Fatal Testament XL is just not worth it anymore. You could consider almost Fatal Testament Double XL and XL the same because, like I said, the proc rate, there's barely any difference between both of them. There really isn't. If you don't believe me, you could go check it out. I have it linked below so that way you can check it out for yourself to see what the heck I'm talking about. So it's pretty much that and everything surrounding that. When it comes to the weapons, with the armors though, the armors are for any class, so that's the beneficial thing. When it comes to armors, there's really only 2 things you gotta worry about when you're spawning this. You may worry about whether you're getting high defense or magic defense, because you may be getting only one. It may be one-sided for you, or the fact that it has a crappy skill. But on the flip side, even if that is you, even if you don't need the armor, you could still probably use it for infusion material down the way of your journey in Unison League or whatever you're doing in the game. So right there, that's another beneficial thing, and it's only 30 gems. So if you're willing, I'd take the opportunity, to be fairly honest, because usually they don't offer, even if it's got crappy skills, they don't offer high cost stuff for 30 gems. So right there, that's very, very cool that they're doing that and everything surrounding that. So let's talk about the monsters and let's wrap this up. Okay, so we got self-proclaimed rival Union first. It's going to increase magic attack and magic defense by 40% for 60 seconds. It's going to get 5% increase in skill level each time you level up. At level 5, which is the max level by the way, it's going to be by 60%. So that's pretty much how that's going to work out. It's going to reduce ability cooldown times for all allies by 25%. It's going to recover 20 costs. It's going to increase all elemental attack by 4 for 60 seconds. It's going to cast Piercer, and then it's going to cast 30% elevation for 60 seconds. So that's pretty much that and everything surrounding this monster. This monster is definitely a player versus enemy monster. Most of its abilities, some of its stuff can be used for Crystal Assault for sure. Reduced ability cooldown time, recovering 20 costs, very handy if you need to do constant attacking. And then the magic attack buff for sure, helpful. But there's monsters out there that could do better. And there's monsters out there that increased all stats, so it's not just magic attack, it's attack as well. So if you got like Lancers in your back line, or crystal attacking, crystal breaking, whatever you want to call it, they could also get a buff as well. Also, archers use magic attack and magic defense, so that's also going to be handy for that, or whoever you have back there. So more of a player versus enemy monster for sure, I'd say. The elemental attack right here only works for player versus enemy. In player versus player, there are very few situations and scenarios. And when I say very few, I mean very few that actually have elements. And it being buffed on your character doesn't do a single thing when you're doing player versus player. Whether it's guild battles, whether it's duel rooms, whether it's coliseums, it do not matter. Kind of same for Piercer. Piercer is definitely more of a player versus enemy type buff. When it comes to player versus player, I'll show you the one that everybody looks for. It's the remove damage reflection, damage reduction, continuous heal effects. That's more of the player versus player one. The reason I'm saying that is because for some reason Piercer doesn't work on Maya and Renovere, even though it says it's supposed to go through damage reflection, damage reduction, stuff like that. The removes damage reflection, damage reduction goes to that, and a lot of people, all these people who survive S rank a lot, they love their Maya and Renovere. They love them. They're married to them. They're in an engagement with them too. They're planning a wedding, bro. They constantly can't let go. They're clinging to Maya and Renovere. I say, if they do not look strong, chances are, if they have a decent ranking, they cling to Maya and Renovere, or they just run a crap ton of negative pressure. One of the two. So, anyways, moving on from there, with my little rant that I was talking about, it's a bit of helpful information. Hopefully, at least it is. This one's kind of like the opposite. I didn't even go over her name, so let me actually go over her name. Royal Prosecutor Cena. This one's a bit opposite towards Union. Attack and defense instead of magic attack and magic defense. It's going to be by 60% as well. Increase ability cooldown times, just like the previous one. This one's going to increase cost recovery speed instead of actual cost. Now, depending on the scenario and situation, either one could be more helpful. Like say, like for example, like if you were just popping one Unison, the 20 cost would be more helpful. But if your team pop like 5 Unisons, this one goes first, and then on top of it, you got that Great Spirit, you're gonna have a lot of time to wait, and because you have a lot of time to wait, the cost recovery speed will probably come more in handy, like for stuff like that personally. I think the 20 cost would be more helpful by default, but like said, it really all depends on the scenario and situation, and of course which one you would prefer, whether it's cost recovery speed or just solid freaking cost. I already went over the moves: damage reflection, damage reduction, continuous heal effects. Piercers, the player versus enemy one, when it comes, like, when you're doing player versus enemy, right, when you're fighting bosses, they consistently love to attack, they consistently use moves over and over, and some of them can consistently add damage reflection, damage reduction, and stuff like that. So Piercer, continuously, like, Piercer just goes through it guaranteed for that amount of time. This one's a one and done deal, but this one works against Madia and Renevere, unlike the Piercer, so this one's more player versus enemy. I mean, player versus player, while Piercer's more player versus enemy. The damage reflection, though, is more player versus player. There's very few occasions, if you're not starting off with damage reflection, there are very few occasions that it's actually going to be helpful besides the thing I just named. That's going to apply 30% concentration for 60 seconds. If this is not used at the very beginning of the battle, not all too useful like said, so that's another thing that it has going for itself. I definitely see this being more though of a player, well, this one can be used in player versus player too. This one's not just player versus enemy, definitely more flexible than the previous one, Union, that I just talked about. So anyways, let's move on from there. Demon King's Army General Yanir. This one's going to do 220 with a success value of 100 for 4 times for magic dark damage. And then it's going to get increased by 10 for each increase in skill level. So this is kind of like Keyroid. This is actually a bit stronger than Keyroid. Not significantly, just a tad bit stronger than Keyroid. So that right there is pretty dang insane. And then this one's it's nasty towards the enemy team. Okay, so let's see what we got here. These are all for all enemies except the last one. Yourself applies resurrection is for yourself. Everything else is for all of the enemies. So it's going to apply karma. It's going to flip all debuffs into debuffs. So if you got like a 60% attack increase, it's going to be a 60% attack decrease. If you got an 80% magic attack increase, it's going to be an 80% magic attack decrease. It's going to reduce status element resistance by 40 for 60 seconds. So when you're seeing these success value of 40s, don't be fooled, because it's actually going to be more of a success value of 80 unless you have nullify status element resistance, which usually isn't the case. So most of the time these are going to be success value of 80. It's not going to be success value of 40. So don't be fooled when you see a success value of 40 and thinking, oh, it's trash. Let alone the stuff it does, it's just trash, because that's not the case. And then let's go over the status elements it does. It's going to apply psychological contamination for 60 seconds. This could block out 1 or 2 moves that you could use, and depending on what it blocks out, it could put you in a very hardcore disadvantage or critical condition where you are up against the wall for sure. It could be nasty. It could absolutely do barely anything to the enemy team, or it could be nasty. It really all depends. It's kind of a risky move, to be fairly honest. And then we got blind right here. If it only stacks once, which probably would be the case, you have to test out the monster. I cannot tell you whether it stacks 1 blind or 2 blind or 3 blinds. If it stacks 2 or higher, sure, that's going to be useful. If it only stacks 1, I wouldn't really count on this skill, to be fairly honest, because having only 1 stack of blind barely makes them miss at all. I think it just reduces their success value to 90 or 80. I'm not exactly sure, but it doesn't do much of 1 stack. So if it's 1 stack, it's not really all too worrisome. Then it's going to apply miasma. This is nasty right here, because miasma is something you almost cannot get rid of whatsoever until you die or the time runs out. It pretty much takes away 5% of your HP every 2.5 seconds. And then on top of it, this one also reduces status element resistance. So if they make miasma actually work out, like if it activates all at the same time and miasma applies when it needs to, around the same time or before any of like everything else applies, the success value is not even going to be 80. It's going to be higher than 80. I'm not sure if it's going to be 90, 95, or 100, but it should be somewhere around there if miasma's like full beneficial effects actually activate towards the targeting enemies, because miasma also reduces status element resistance. So that could be nasty if this one also is going to reduce status element resistance on top of being able to reduce it by 40, because it's going to be even more of a success value for everything else that's going to be activating. So that's absolutely nasty. And then it's going to cast curse as well. When you're starting off, most of these endgame guilds have a cleric. Not all, but most of these endgame guilds start off with a cleric. Usually they don't have arc heal or greater arc heal, so definitely having curse definitely would come in handy for sure. If you cannot heal your team, they're kind of screwed, considering most of the scenarios and situations people survive is stuff like perpetual healing or having a really feisty cleric. And then on top of everything it does, it's going to remove 25 cost from them to set them back even more. So this is a really nasty starting off monster for player versus player, more towards guild battles than duel rooms and coliseums. Can come in handy, can be clutch for them. I could see it being more used in guild battles though. And even with guild battles, to be fairly honest, I'm not sure whether this is going to be like an extremely OP monster or it's just going to be good, so you might see this a bit. I'm not exactly sure, but I can say this monster is going to be orientated around more player versus player, more guild battles, and it's going to be, whether it doesn't matter which player versus player scenario it's going to be, this is going to be one of those Unison haste monsters. By Unison haste, I mean like this strategy where you try to use Unison at the very first round, you try to use it first, whether you're being a treasure hunter or a soldier, you're trying to get Unison as fast as possible, you're trying to pop it so that way you could hurt the enemy team in the first round and push them in a corner so that way you can do whatever you need to get your strategy going and win the duel, like win the whole guild battle or whatever you're doing. So that's what I mean by Unison haste. And then we got Elder Bandit Chris right here. Give me back my underwear. I think that's from Kazuma. If you ever use his attack, if you ever press his attack button, right? He like steals panties. I think this is, or not panties, underwear, whatever. I'm not sure. I don't watch the anime personally. And then I think this is a reply to that. Give me back my underwear. But anyways, moving on from there, decent damage. Well, not decent damage. It does damage. That's all I can say. 220 alone, just once, is decent. Not even decent. My bad. I said it again. Just damage. It's also going to increase by 10 for each increase in skill level, but let me say it again, it's just damage. This one's going to recover 25 cost, reduce ability cooldown times, increase critical hit chance, and critical hit ability power by 40% for critical hit chance, 40 ability power for critical hits by 60%. It's going to increase your usage gauge gains by 3, and then it's going to reduce physical / magical damage taken to 0 one time. So this monster is more leaning towards definitely player versus player. I'd say it's kind of like Royal Prosecutor, the one that has the blue outfit. I'm not sure the exact names. Definitely more towards guild. These two are good for player versus enemy or guild battles, but it's more towards the second round and above. It's not like a Unison haste monster. No way, shape, form, or fashion. These will help do damage towards guild crystals if your team or the guild you're fighting manage to survive a second round and above. The buffs that they have and the stuff that they do helps more towards that. Considering they recover costs, reduce ability cooldown time, so you're attacking a lot more consistently. Like you're doing a lot more attacks because you have more costs. You got more ability cooldown time to actually use the attacks faster, and then they got buffs to help increase damage. So that's all I gotta say about this collab spawn and everything surrounding it. Thank you for tuning in, thank you for watching, and I hope this helped out. This is the AzureWrath, and I'll catch you in the next video. I'm out. Peace.